All right, we are in chapter 8. This is Theme Time by Shinshu Robert. Um, just to kind of recap for you, Jackie, the, there's a fascicle written by Dogen, who's a 13th century Zen master. He's credited with bringing Zen meditation from China to Japan in the 13th century. Buddhism was already in Japan, but Zen Buddhism, Zen meditation, hadn't quite taken root. So Dogen brought that over. He didn't live very long. He died when he was 52 years old, but at that time he revolutionized Zen practice. And he also wrote this collection of writings called Shobogenzo. One of those writings is entitled Uji, which means being time, in which he very carefully breaks down the idea that time is separate from us. It is not separate, that we are time itself, in as much as we are being. Because we're not separate from anything. We are one with everything, including time. And Shinshu Robert is a Dharma successor of Suzuki Roshi. Suzuki Roshi started San Francisco Zen Center. Maizumi Roshi, who started Los Angeles Zen Center, is the lineage that I come through, and this group comes through. And Suzuki Roshi and San Francisco, they knew each other at the time. That's the lineage that Ms. Roberts comes through. So, this next section of Uji, and Dogen writes, in spite of this, a person holds various views at the time he is unenlightened and has yet to learn the Buddha's Dharma. Hearing the words, the time being, he thinks that at one time the old Buddha became a creature with 3 heads and 8 arms, and at another time he became a 16-foot Buddha. He imagines it as like crossing a river or a mountain. The river and mountain may still exist, but I have now left them behind, and at the present time I reside in the splendid Vermilion Palace. To him, the mountain or river and I are as distant from one another as heaven from earth. So he's basically saying he's expressing the typical view of our relationship with time. That there is a past time, and there's a present time, and there's a future time, and those times are separate. And basically, and when it comes to our practice, there's a time when we were not enlightened. There's a time that we are currently practicing to get enlightened, and there'll be another time when we finally reach enlightenment. And we have this idea that those distinctions are actually real and do not, and they don't come together. They don't happen at the same time. That you actually leave behind all of your unenlightened state once you become enlightened, and that you are never going to be that unenlightened being again. We also tend to project this onto other people, like Zen teachers. We think that those teachers should have done the work, and they should never do anything that is considered to be unenlightened. So unfortunately, they disappoint us at every turn, because that is just not the case. And we have these bizarre criteria that we set for ourselves for being enlightened. The example that Ms. Roberts uses in the book is that if I get to the point of being able to sit for 25 days straight, that means I'm on the right path. I'm like 25% there. And then I get to the point where, because I don't know if it's actually true, there are these monks that can actually melt snow with their body. You can sit in snow and melt it. And so she's talking about those monks, and she says maybe you can get to the point where you can dry towels with your body heat. You can do this miraculous thing, and now you're 90% enlightened. And then you get to this completely enlightened state in which you can never do anything bad, and you never go back to being in delusion. Well, the idea is delusion. That doesn't work, because time and time and time and time and time again, Dogen has expressed that you do not sit to become enlightened. You sit because you are enlightened. There is nothing about this enlightened state that is separate from any other state. It's the realization of that is often hindered by our upside down thinking, as the Buddha expressed. Because he basically said all beings, and this is the only teacher that ever has started his enlightened state with that, as with being all inclusive. All beings have the wisdom of the Tathagata, except for upside down thinking. So this practice is basically about upside downing or unverting our thinking, so that we can realize that we already have this. There is nothing to get. You don't have to obtain it. It's already there. It's just the realization. Because the thing that brought him to this enlightened state was seeing the morning star, Venus, probably. Now, Venus had been there for billions of years. Not in it didn't just suddenly appear in the sky for the Buddha to see. But he had, at that point, uninverted his thinking enough to be able to recognize that all beings, that he himself and all other beings, already had the wisdom of enlightenment. And he ran into tons of obstacles, and expressed as Mara, or the devil, trying to tempt him out of doing this. And this Mara sits with us, or wakes up with us every morning, because it's like, I really don't want to get out of bed. I do not. So just 1 more hour. You have sleep. And I call in sick too. I can get so much done if I don't go into the office. That's Mara. This not doing what we know we should be doing, not taking care of what we know we should be taking care of. All those things come up, and he came up with the Buddha as he was sitting, and because he basically sat down with that determination. He'd been through all these ascetic practices, and he had done everything he thought he could to get to obtain this enlightenment, and he didn't have it. And so he sat down under the Bodhi tree and said, I am not moving until this is done. And
so when you're being retired July 7th, you're going to say, if I only had an office I could go to, I can get so much done.
Except before I have a home office. So I don't have that excuse.
But it's full of cats.
It's full of cats.
Yeah.
Only all this cat hair wasn't here on this desk.
I work like this.
Yes. There will always be some excuse.
Yeah. Joko Beck calls it the if onlys.
The if onlys. Yeah, if onlys. But we already have this, and I love this creature that Joe talks about. He thinks that at one time the old Buddha became the creature with 3 heads and 8 arms. That is multitasking. You're just not focused. You're just all over the place, trying to do all these things all at the same time. Listen to 3. A perfect example this week was, by now, one of our biggest unions, their contract's about to expire, so they of course are acting out, and they are running around to all the departments trying to, with their campaign for, stick with us, get prepared for a work stoppage, because we're gonna take the employers to the mat. We can get you more, blah 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 blah. So they were in one of the departments, and this particular manager is very. She says one thing out of one mouth, one side of her mouth. She says, "Oh, I'm very pro-union." So they arrive in her apartment. So I get this urgent text from. I'm on a mandatory meeting with the Human Resources Leadership Team region-wide, because we're talking about this massive overpayment that has just happened and what we're going to have to do. Computer glitch, technology. So I can't interrupt this meeting. So I'm getting the union rep who has me on speed dial, and I see her name and coming up twice now. She's like, I didn't answer the first time. So I'm texting her while I'm on this call saying, "What's up? I'm in a meeting. Can you text?" And she texts back, "Urgent." She calls again. I'm going, "Carla, I can't talk right now. text me what's going on. So that begins that text. Next text that comes in is from the manager. Arthur, the union is here. They won't leave. Like blah 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 blah. I'm trying to. So I'm giving advice to the union rep saying you can do this, this, and this. The manager, you can do this, you can't do that. And I've got this HR tail meeting going on. Third text message comes in from security because the manager has called security to get the union out of the department. So I've got Matt from security, Carla from the union, Ronnie from the manager, and my HR teammate all going at the same time. This is 3 heads and 8 arms.
How do you say goodbye to all this?
Really?
Yeah, how much fun do you have?
So I am just glad I have this Bluetooth keyboard in which I can switch back and forth between typing on all of these devices, pretty much seamlessly. And so I can actually have this 10-way conversation and listen to what's going on in the HOT because they're asking questions, and I say, what's going on in Baldwin Park? So I'm typing the chat, what's going on in Baldwin Park, and I have to respond to callers, respond to lines, respond to security. I'm like, all right, everybody, stand down.
You be careful you don't tell the union something you're supposed to be telling management.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was very careful. That message was the same to every party because I have messed that up one time. I typed one thing to a person. Fortunately, it was something innocuous. But yeah, enlightenment will only come when I have a chance to be focused and clear and have a chance to sit. And that is not the case because this creature with 3 heads and 8 arms is an enlightened being. This 16-foot Buddha, this perfectly clear, being that has, free time to actually sit and focus, is equally enlightened. Enlightenment is not disturbed by delusion at all. You don't get away from delusion by becoming enlightened. And in fact, you become able to use delusion very skillfully as a tool. So it comes with you. Because we have to engage in the delusion of dualistic thinking and dualistic conversation all the time. And you have to meet people where they are in order to have those conversations. And not everyone is hanging out in emptiness. You're waiting for us to have this non-verbal conversation, which we're all peaceful and calm all the time. That is not reality. And enlightenment is about being in reality, as it is, and not as we want it to be. Darn. I was hoping I was going to get out of this somehow, but no. We get to be in reality as reality is, in this present moment as it is. And so in that present moment, 3 text messages, conference call, and going on at the same time. And that was the reality I had to be in. Fortunately, that doesn't happen all the time. It happens enough, but and I'm sure there is a part of me that will miss it. There's this adrenaline rush and this feeling of accomplishment when you actually brought that to resolution during all of that was going on, and everyone was thanking me for it. I'm like, thank you, don't do that again.
You're going to be hard to replace.
No, well, all the directors go through this. I mean, if you work at Kaiser long enough, this is normal. It's kind of the normal way that Kaiser runs. So hopefully they'll promote someone who's been with Kaiser for a while, and so it's not a shock to their system, because that's the problem we've had with trying to hire people who are from the outside, because they come in and think Kaiser is insane. How does this place run? But Kaiser's been doing this for 70 plus years, and it's not going to change. So, and for me, because I was kind of, 37 years with Kaiser, kind of grew up in that madness. So it's just, another Tuesday. There was nothing to do about it.
Well, we'll try to help you out while when you transition, we'll have some drama in the Sangha, just to keep so you feel like you still got something there to work with. Okay.
Do not go to any trouble.
What would we think about? Okay.
What do they call that? Borrow trouble. Yeah. I pray for dull, actually. There's never a dull moment. I pray for just one dull moment. Would be nice. So yeah, I'm looking forward. It will be different, in retirement, but no, I don't have any plans of slowing down. Not yet, anyway. So I'll just be being delusional in another way. But yeah, so these two things, this horrible bad thing of having 3 heads and 8 arms, and this wonderfully good thing of being this perfectly, calm and reposed Buddha, are not separate. They arise within each of us as need arises. So to be able to tap into that, obviously I needed to be this crazed 3-headed 8-armed monster, in that moment, because that's what needed to happen. And other times, I get to come to this beautiful place in Seal Beach and sit quietly for 30 minutes. Then we'll walk for 10 minutes. Then sit for 30 minutes. And my phone didn't ring during that time. It's off. So if it was ringing, I didn't hear it. So there is both. They are not separate. We try to make them separate, and that's how we create suffering for ourselves. We try to set up these expectations and these illusions about what we want to get, what we want to obtain, but you've already got it. It's already there. Nothing to get. Just the practice of being with it is what zazen is. So I think it's important to provide that space for yourself to practice being in the out. But it's not you're not sitting to get something. You sit because you already have it. That's why you're making that time for yourself and space for yourself to be a Buddha. Because the Buddha did not have an easy time with it. Talking was, poor little rich boy, born with a silver spoon in his mouth, knew that was not it. There was something wrong with this beautiful surrounding that he was being raised in, because they made sure that he never saw death or sickness or decay. Now, I can't even imagine the work that the servants had to do to keep any dying flower, any dying plant out of view of the prince. That just must have, can you imagine if you made a mistake, the king was probably not going to be happy with you. So they had some work to do. And obviously it didn't work because they were trying to prevent you, because there was a prediction they would either be a great king or a great teacher, and they wanted a great king. So they weren't going to let him, see anything else that could probably trigger any sort of spiritual awakening, and they failed, fortunately for us, 2,500 years later, because he escaped and he went out and had to ask. Unfortunately, his cousin went with him as his bodyguard. And what is that? Well, that's sickness. And what is that? Well, that's old age. And what is that? That's death. And so just seeing those things, he knew that what he'd been raised in was not real. He was 16 at that time, already had a child and a wife at that point. And some people will find fault with the fact that he leaves his wife and child to go to these separate practices. They were well cared for, rich family. And they joined him later. But he went through years of these ascetic practices and all the other, he became very familiar with all the other Buddhist practices at the time, and still wasn't satisfied. Still sat down under the Bodhi tree because what he learned from all of those practices and everything didn't work. So, I mean, after Sugata was that the woman who saved him from the river, he was surviving on a grain of rice a day. They said you could see his backbone through his stomach, and bent over to go drink the water of the river. He fell in, and this milk maiden rescued him and gave him some milk, and brought him to the realization, okay, this extreme stuff is going to kill me. So I need to come back to the middle That's the birth of the middle path. And we did. And here we are today. We are the Buddha. Right here, right now. And he told us, y'all had it all.
It's an interesting thought when you came though, because one of the first challenges for me is to realize or to accept that everyone out there has that enlightenment, and there are some people I really don't want to bring up that confession to.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the work, right? That's part of the work.
Well, it's the delusion, that's the, other part of that point. I know I have a hard time thinking Donald Trump is enlightened, but, he labors under so much delusion. What we think of delusion, he thinks of as truth. So that's the other part of that. If he took all that delusion away, and just, he somehow came to realization that all this purpose was meaningless, and he would have to, kind of go on a search for 100 days and see what there was.
He is a sentient being, I guess that's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Buddha didn't leave room for othering.
No, that's your compassion
Yeah.
side of it.
Yeah.
But it's challenging.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult to grant enlightenment to those we disagree with. And that's, and we all, I tried to introduce that concept to that Kaiser, and it did not work. Because we're doing this Teams meeting in which we're talking about inclusion. And in the meetings leading up to this, I said, well, if we're going to be inclusive, we need to include racists in this conversation and make a safe space for them to express how they feel. That concept, that idea, was like, no, we're not going to do that.
Well, who are you gonna find that identifies as racist?
Well,
That's another problem.
not as racist, but there was a particular doctor who did not believe that systemic racism existed. So that's what I started with, because that was her truth. So how do you see this? And she refused. Actually, there was an edict from the CEO that Kaiser was going to take a stand against systemic racism. We were going to do everything in our power, and all employees are required to do everything in their power to fight systemic racism. She stood up in a leadership meeting and said that she was not going to do that because systemic racism does not exist. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a Cuban woman. Mm-hmm. Brilliant by all accounts. A tyrant by most accounts as well. But she, basically declared that, and the two black female administrators sitting in the room got up and walked out. So this was you can't consider yourself to be inclusive if you are excluding something or somebody. But that pure form of inclusion is difficult to accomplish, because there's no one. They don't train us. They train us how to talk about it, be inclusive. They don't train us how to include people who are exclusive. To talk to people, to create space for that exclusivity that they believe should be. I mean, there are people to this day. There's a friend of mine sitting in a restaurant, and she is in a mixed race couple, and this woman walked over to her table and said that this mixing of the races should be illegal.
Well, thank you very much. We were waiting for that.
Yes. So they complained to the restaurant manager, and the restaurant manager asked them to leave.
What?
Ask the woman who came over.
No, the woman who came over.
Not the mixed
Yeah.
race
Oh,
couple.
okay.
Yeah, not the, no, ask the woman who made that.
Get my pronouns corrected.
Yes.
So Wayu, in your example here, if we're all enlightened and yet somebody could be deemed racist, then we have to put those together, right? There's enlightened racists.
Well,
I don't.
Well, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
let's
I
be
know,
clear.
but I'm kind of disagreeing with the whole thing, because
Yeah.
at some point you have to be, there's wisdom in some of our preferences too, and we can't just be so all accepting of bad actors and bad behavior. But we can be compassionate and not, be judgmental and see the suffering and where they're at in their station in life.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're granted enlightenment because that's what the Buddha said. I mean,
No.
that just doesn't seem to make sense to me.
No, enlightenment is about being in reality as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Reality as it is contains people who are racist.
Right, and so the wisdom is in being able to communicate or interact with these people in a way that's not harmful, right? But perhaps useful, maybe not, but not, accepting too of, someone like who's murdering somebody for some sake or beating them up. You're not going to be like embracing that.
Right.
You're gonna, the wisdom comes from with clarity, then you know how to skillfully act and stop it from happening.
Or stop it from causing suffering.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll ever get rid of it happening or people having those ideas.
No.
But you will, because we probably have them, because we have some idea of the type of people around whom we feel safe. That sometimes those ideas fall along tribal belief systems, like, I'm terribly biased in favor of Zazen as a spiritual practice. So if someone was walking here and started to preach, Christian gospel, in this room, that's not something that I'm going to appreciate in that moment. So if there isn't, there is kind of this exclusive thing that I want to be around like-minded people for at least a couple hours on Saturday. Yeah.
So I'm at Huntington Beach Main Street in a rally one day, and there's a guy in front of me, and he takes his shirt off, and his tattoo all over his back says, "Thank God I'm white." Is he ever going to regret that tattoo? I don't know. Is he ever going to be?
Maybe.
No. Well, I mean, my hero, and I always forget his name, is the guy who went to these Klansmen, African American men, started talking to these Klansmen, and getting to know them on a personal level. And as a result of that exchange, because he just went to his initial intent was just to find out why, he was listening. Tell me, about you, and I'll tell you about me. And as a result of that personal relationship, they gave up their clanswork. They gave them to him. He has this collection of robes from Klansmen. Last I heard, his collection was up to about 200. So people, you can't change someone's mind for them. You can bring them to some realization about what their mindset causes, or perhaps the basis of their mindset is based on some false assumption, and they then have the opportunity to change their own minds. So that's possible. It's possible that you're interacting with him as a white woman, and bringing him to some other realization. Because certainly if a black person walks up to him, he's not going to accept anything that a black person says.
Well, except you said that black people talking to the white Klansmen did that.
It did. But, but there was, and I don't know why. In that case, it worked. So it could happen if is willing to listen or willing to engage with people who can explain things to him, and bring him to the point where he gets to question his point of view. Possible change, possibly not. All aspects of beliefs, the entire spectrum of these belief systems exist in reality, and our practice is about being compassionate in reality just as it is. So how do we be compassionate with that? How do we respond compassionately to thank God I'm white? You know, he's grateful. It's a statement of fact. He is, he's light skin, or what we call light skin, which is a weird name. That's no one's white, no one's black. We have that's a construct that he has and that we have created, and we've bought into to a certain extent. Is that real? No. Is he in a place where he's ready to accept that? Probably not. Could he? I think anything's possible. Would he have the opportunity to question that and bring that to come to some other different conclusion? It's maybe he's already enlightened. He's just saying, thank God I am the color that I am. I'm just kind of that doesn't mean that I'm excluding anybody else. I don't get that. Yeah. Just a statement of fact. I doubt it.
It is a little off-putting.
Yes. Yeah.
It could be, thank God I'm a white man. That could be.
This is yours.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I'm like, does that make it better? I don't know.
No, I'm saying.
No, better. Yeah. So reality contains all of it. So an enlightenment is about being in reality just as it is.
And doing what needs to be done. I mean, there is, some action that one has to take too, or it doesn't have to, but if you're in the position to act and you act wisely, I think you should act. It's not just being everything, it's just,
Passivity.
some people are good activists and some people are better silent.
Sometimes the most
liberal
thing you can do is nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, again, it's just all in that wisdom of like, okay, what can I do? What's needed to be done? And can I do anything? But if not, stand back.
I was going to say, I think in a sense, we're talking about two different things. One could be a person's level of spiritual experience. I've experienced oneness, and because of that, I have a certain level of experience. Many people will say, no, I've never experienced oneness. I don't know what that is. I hear about it, but I don't know what that is, because it's a first-person thing. The other thing is a person's spiritual intelligence. And spiritual intelligence can be very different. You could still be a fundamental Christian and yet have experiences that are very Zen-like. I say those things are different. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean because you've had this high spiritual experience of oneness that your spiritual intelligence has raised, because you're talking about a different dimension. Now, you would think they're somewhat correlated, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that one propels the other. And a lot of people are, fundamentalists, and they very much, have a mythical belief in the Bible. They still think Moses really did part the Red Sea, that Jesus was born from a virgin. Those things they take literally. Other people have sort of gone beyond that and say, well, is that scientifically possible? And so science comes in and says, those things probably didn't happen. It's probably more like myth than reality. But that would be a person who has a scientific view, might have a higher intelligence, quote unquote, in terms of evolution than somebody who still believes in myths.
Well, we have a problem with myths. We believe that Buddha lived for 16 years and never experienced illness. I think that's mythology as well. It's impossible to live to not have, because you can't be healthy and never experience unhealthiness.
Well, and the Buddha was also born from the Virgin, and born out of the side. Yeah. So, we have our myths. There's no lack
He was
of.
born from where?
His mother was a virgin.
I didn't know that.
So, virgin birth, born from the side of his mother, and immediately walked as soon as he came out of the womb, and pointed to the sky and said, "I alone am the more honored one." So, if you believe that a baby can be born, first of all, from virgin birth, and then he walked immediately, and flower petals fell down from the story. So
When he walked, right? Every time he walked, a flower would bloom.
So,
Worse and worse.
Yeah, it does.
God, our story sounds worse than the Catholic story.
So if you get into the Buddhist canon, there's no lack of mythological wonderment that takes place in all of these stories, and then you go back even further before he was born as human in the Chautauqua tales. He was all of these animals. So we have no lack. We are not without sin.
Yeah, I would just say to that, there are Buddhists who probably still believe those myths to be true, and then there's other Buddhists who have sort of moved on and said, well, it's a nice little story, but let's bring in some reality here as to what we think probably really did happen. So I just say that there's a difference when you start talking about people. I think you really have to look at the level of spiritual experience that they've had. Yeah, and and a lot of traditions, even Buddhist traditions, they don't meditate. They study the canon. They but meditation is which a very small part of their practice.
Right.
If it even exists, which I'm really surprised that Buddhist monks wouldn't have not have a meditation practice. But then then we have to look at again, where are they? What's their spiritual intelligence? What's their paradigms that sort of govern the structure of their life, the structure of their thinking? And people are very different.
I also think it's what some people need. Some people need those stories to ground them in a belief system, to ground them in either precepts or the Ten Commandments or those codes of ethics that most spiritual practices propose. And our job as enlightened beings is to meet them where they are, meet them where that reality exists, and we're not trying to convert them because we don't have any beliefs per se. I mean, this practice is really about stripping away any sort of beliefs or stories that separate us from reality. So we can't go in and say, become a Zen Buddhist and you'll be saved from what exactly? Because it's counterintuitive. Because saving beings from suffering is not about saving them from pain. And it's about bringing them into reality and being at peace in reality, being at home in whatever that reality is. So it's a little counterintuitive because we think that if we're going to save something, we're saving them from something. But we're really saving them from separation, from trying to not be in reality. Because you just be at home in whatever that reality is, whether it is sickness or health or living and dying, birth or death. That is what reality is, but it is always been. We're not trying to make it anything other than what it is. His gratitude for being white is just his reality, and how can we compassionately accept that? And if it is causing harm, how do we compassionately stop the harm?
get back to your systemic racism example, I remember asking Tencho one time, I said that I was having trouble talking to my family about Buddhism. He said, don't call it Buddhism.
Yeah.
Just talk to them about what you're doing and what you're exploring, what you're discovering. I think the same thing's true of systemic racism. That if you would just, instead of giving it a name, just said, we want to talk about the fact that, African Americans are 12% of the population, but only 4% of the doctors are at Kaiser. Anybody have any thoughts about that? I mean, you can get at it from other ways without giving it a name, just identifying it as.
Yeah, I think the name is always the problem. That's how I actually even work with clients when they bring up in their religious stuff, whether it's, Christianity, Catholicism, or whatever. And then I'm like, oh my God, all this Jesus stuff, right? But then, I kind of strip away my thought around it and then just talk about the principles of it, the things that they believe in. And then that creates a better conversation about generosity, love, and all of those things that you're striving for. And then with race, I mean, it's really like what do you feel is being taken from you, or because that's usually what it is. Like they're taking away all of our programs and or whatever, immigration and things like that. So yeah, just stripping the name off of it and just seeing what is the problem, and maybe that's a better conversation to have.
Well,
Than calling them a racist.
Yeah, except that I was having a discussion with my stepmother the other day, and she was a very devout Christian, born-again woman. And we just had a discussion about spiritual practice religion. And I said, so you believe that little babies come into the world drenched in sin? They haven't done anything to anybody. They just arrived in the world, but they're covered in sin, right? Yes, that's right. They're all original sin. They're all invested in sin. Well, and they can't get clean of the sin unless they find Jesus as their Lord and Savior. That's right. But they're little babies. They don't know how to do that. And a little baby dies. That baby's condemned to hell, eternal damnation for the rest of their existence. Yes, that's right. So how can that be?
Yeah.
When you think of it, how can it be?
So then you just go into what is sin? Just talking about sin.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she believes what she's been taught.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from. Because I was taught. I dared to question her. My sister didn't, who still doesn't. What she was taught was true. That's what she believes. Exactly.
I think I interpreted the part of the text that stood out to me, besides I think thinking about other people's reality is I guess my own conflicting reality. I think I have this competing duality where I have this I guess wise mind part of me that's I'm going to take the higher road, and then there's part of me that's extremely willful, and I used to think that would disqualify me from any chance at enlightenment or being a good person. It's a part of me I don't really like, and I'm trying to face it head on, I guess, and look at it and work with her. So I don't know, I thought it was kind of nice that it kind of is part of the enlightenment to make peace with that part of yourself you don't really like, and accept it. But I don't know, old habits die hard. I'm trying really hard to work with it and steer in the right direction. I'm at this level of self-awareness where I see it happening, but I haven't quite steered the ship away from doing all these things that I probably shouldn't be doing. So
you are both the three-headed eight-armed monster.
Yeah.
And 16-foot from there. Without separation. It's all you. It's all you.
I know, right?
All right, any comments from the Zoom? Kurt, Don? No? Yes.
Just gotta say one thing to Mark's comment. I think, as Zen Buddhist practitioners, we come to value direct experience over belief. And that's the fundamental shift that, we've made, is that we want to experience the truth for ourselves, and we sit to find that truth, whereas other ones are happy to let somebody else tell them what to believe. And there's a big difference in terms of those two worldviews. Hopefully your mother-in-law at some point will shift, but, you know, evolution takes time.
No, it's a very important insight.
Yeah.
Because if you just believe what people tell you, then you're not living in reality as it is. It's your belief about reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Babies are sin-filled.
Or not.